My name is Rachel. I'm 29 years old. And last Thanksgiving, I sat at a table with the people who raised me and watched 30 seconds undo 30 years. But I'm getting ahead of myself. For most of my life, I was the footnote, not the chapter. My sister Vanessa was the chapter. She was the one my parents talked about at dinner, the one my mom called her friends to brag about, the one whose report cards went on the refrigerator while mine went in the recycling bin before I'd even finished reading them. I don't say that to be dramatic. I say it because it's the kind of thing that's so routine you stop noticing it the way you stop noticing the hum of a refrigerator. It's just always there. Growing up in Richmond, Virginia, we were a middle class family in a split level house with a basketball hoop in the driveway that my dad had put up for Vanessa because she wanted to try out for the school team. She quit after 2 weeks. The hoop stayed. I'm Robert, 7 years old, in the driveway on Saturday mornings while everyone slept, just to have something that was mine. Even if it wasn't. Vanessa is 4 years older than me. From the moment I was old enough to understand the difference between how she was treated and how I was treated, I understood one thing clearly. She was the investment, and I was the assumption. She got the SAT prep courses, the private college counselor, the laptop upgrade every 2 years. I got the hand me down Dell with a cracked hinge and a dad who shrugged when I asked about tutoring and said, "You're smart enough, you'll figure it out." It sounded like a compliment. It wasn't. My mom ran the household finances and she was meticulous about it, which made the disparity even harder to explain away. It wasn't that they didn't have the money. It was that when it came to me, there was always a reason to wait. We'll see. Maybe next semester. You don't really need that, do you? For Vanessa, the answer was almost always yes before she finished asking. When Vanessa got into the University of Virginia, my parents threw a party. Actual invitations, catered food, my aunt driving 3 hours from Roanoke. When I got into Virginia Commonwealth University 2 years later with a partial scholarship, my dad said, "Good job, kiddo," and went back to the game he was watching. My mom asked if I'd remember to call my grandmother. I didn't cry about it. That surprises people when I tell them. But I'd already built a wall around that part of me, the part that wanted them to make a big deal out of something I'd done. I'd learned to stop wanting it because wanting it only hurt more when it didn't come. VCU was where I started to figure out who I actually was. I was studying communications and graphic design, a combination my dad called artsy stuff with exactly the tone you'd expect. I lived in a tiny apartment off campus with a roommate named Fiona, a nursing student who kept medical terminology flashcards taped to the bathroom mirror. We were both broke and both determined. And there was a kind of solidarity in that I'd never felt in my own house. I picked up a part-time job at a local print shop, making flyers for bars and real estate agents and church bulletins. It paid $11 an hour and smelled like ink and hot laminate, and I genuinely loved it. Not because it was glamorous, but because something I made was going into the world. Someone was paying me to make something. That was new. The idea that eventually changed everything came from a problem I kept watching people try to solve badly. Small businesses in Richmond, restaurants and boutiques and barber shops, were paying hundreds of dollars a month for marketing they didn't understand to people who didn't care about them. I see their Facebook pages. Outdated menus, blurry photos taken on someone's old phone, posts that went out twice a month and got 4 likes. Meanwhile, the owners were talented, passionate people who just didn't know how to talk about themselves online. I started offering to help, at first for free, then for $50, then for $150. I'd go in, take photos, write their copy, build out a content schedule, and actually talk to them about what made their business different. I had a client, a Jamaican bakery on Broad Street, whose owner had been in Richmond for 22 years and whose jerk chicken patties had a literal cult following. Her Instagram had 200 followers. After 3 months working with me, she had 11,000. She cried when she told me. I drove home and sat in my car in the parking lot of my apartment for 20 minutes, just feeling something I didn't have a word for yet. I called it a side thing for a long time. Even to myself, I kept my job at the print shop, finished my degree, and kept taking on clients one at a time. By the time I graduated, I had 14 paying clients and a business bank account I'd opened at a credit union down the street. I named the business Steadlight because one of my design professors had told me once that good branding was like good lighting. It didn't change what something was, it just helped people finally see it. I didn't tell my parents much about it. Not because I was keeping a secret, but because every time I tried, the conversation turned back to Vanessa. She'd graduated from UVA, gotten a job at a consulting firm in DC, and my mom tracked her career the way some people track a favorite sports team. Every promotion, every client win, every time Vanessa mentioned a colleague who was impressed with her. I tried to mention that I'd landed a new client or hit a revenue milestone, and my mom would say, "That's great, honey," and then immediately pivot. "Did you hear Vanessa is being considered for a senior role? They really see her potential." I stopped mentioning Steadlight. I let them think I was doing some freelance design work and getting by okay. But Steadlight was growing. I brought on 2 contractors, a photographer and a copywriter. Then a junior account manager. We moved out of my apartment and into a co working space. Then out of that into an actual office, a real one with a lease and a conference room and a coffee maker that didn't take 3 tries to work. By the time I was 27, we were doing over $1 million a year in revenue. By 28, closer to 2.5. I'm not saying this to talk about money. I'm saying it because I want you to understand what was sitting underneath the surface of every family dinner where they asked me how my little design thing was going. During all of this, Vanessa's trajectory at the consulting firm had stalled. She was passed over for a senior promotion twice. She started freelancing on the side, which she described to my mom as consulting, and my mom described to everyone else as Vanessa's incredible entrepreneurial venture. When I heard my mom use the word entrepreneurial to describe Vanessa's situation and then remembered she'd never once used that word for me, something went quiet inside that had been loud for a long time. Thanksgiving was my mom's idea, same as every year. She hosts it, she plans it, she controls it. The table is always set the same way. Vanessa at my dad's right hand, my mom at the other end, me across from whoever happened to fill the remaining seat. That year, it was my Uncle Gary, who smelled like pipe tobacco and asked me every single year what I was up to with a tone that suggested he didn't expect much of an answer. I drove up from Richmond the morning of. I'd thought a lot about whether to go. My therapist, who I'd been seeing for about a year at that point, had framed it the same way I'd heard from someone else once: go as an observer, not as a participant waiting for something. Go to see clearly, not to get something you never got. That reframe helped more than I expected. I parked in front of my parents' house and sat there for a minute. The lawn had that scrubby November look, half the leaves still stuck in the gutter. My dad's truck was in the driveway. Vanessa's car, a newer model than mine, was already there. My mom answered the door before I could ring the bell. She hugged me quickly, stepped back to look at my coat like she was evaluating it, and said, "You look tired. Are you sleeping okay?" I said I was fine. She said Vanessa had brought a beautiful pie, just beautiful, from this bakery in Georgetown that was apparently impossible to get a reservation at. I nodded. Inside, I told myself, data collection. Vanessa was at the kitchen counter with a glass of wine, already comfortable in the way she always was in that house. She looked at me and smiled, the smile she'd been giving me since we were teenagers, fond but slightly pitying, like I was a stray she'd grown attached to. "Hey you," she said. "How's business? Still doing the small business stuff?" "Still, that word." "It's good," I said. "Growing." She nodded like I'd said something mildly interesting and turned back to my mom to finish whatever they'd been talking about. My dad came in from the den, gave me a side hug, asked if I'd hit any traffic on 95. I said no. He said good and went back to the football game. That was our whole conversation until dinner. The table was everything it always was. My mom had made the green bean casserole, the sweet potato dish with the marshmallows on top, the cranberry sauce from scratch the way her mother had taught her. The food was genuinely good. It always was. That was never the problem. Vanessa dominated the first hour of dinner the way she always did, naturally, like the air in a room just rearranged itself around her. She talked about a project she'd just finished, a client she'd impressed, a trip she was planning to Portugal. My mom kept refilling her wine glass, asking follow up questions, touching her arm when she laughed. My dad chimed in occasionally with the comfortable ease of a man who'd spent 30 years rooting for one team. I ate my food. I listened. Uncle Gary asked me about my design company, and I gave a short answer, and he nodded and went back to asking Vanessa about Portugal. My mom turned to me eventually, the way she always did eventually, with the look of someone who remembered they had a second child. So, Rachel, she said, you're still doing the branding work? The local business stuff? Yes, I said. We've actually grown a lot this year. Oh, that's good. She was already half turning back toward Vanessa. As long as you're covering your expenses. Vanessa laughed. Not meanly exactly, just thoughtlessly. You know, I was actually thinking about the kind of work Rachel does. There's a market for it, honestly. Might be worth looking into scaling it up, Rock. Have you thought about that? She said it like she was offering advice, like she'd seen something I'd missed. Like I hadn't spent 5 years building the thing she was describing to me as a hypothetical. We crossed 2.5 million in revenue this year, I said. I didn't plan it. I hadn't rehearsed it as a speech. I just said it the way I would have said anything else, factual, plainly, into the middle of the table. The silence was different from other silences. It had texture. My mom's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Vanessa's head tilted in a way I'd never seen before, like a record scratch behind her eyes. My dad looked up from his plate. What? My mom said. Steadlight, I said. The company. We did 2.5 million this year. We have a team of 9 people. We have a new office we moved into in September. Vanessa let out a short laugh that didn't quite land. Wait, like $2.5 million? In revenue? Yes. She looked at my mom. My mom looked at her. My dad set his fork down slowly. How long has this been going on? My mom asked, and the way she asked it, I noticed, wasn't congratulatory. It was almost accusatory, like I'd been withholding something that belonged to her. Since before I graduated, I said. About 6 years. You never told us it was that serious, she said. I looked at her. I tried. A few times. You asked about Vanessa's promotion instead. Her mouth opened. No sound came out. Rachel. My dad's voice was careful. This is a lot to process. I know, I said. I've been processing it for 6 years alone. Vanessa had her phone out. I watched her jaw do something complicated while she looked at the screen, searching, I assumed, for Steadlight. Finding it. Reading whatever she found. She put the phone face down on the table and didn't say anything for a long moment. Why didn't you tell us? My mom finally asked, her voice thinner now. Something cracked in it. We're your family. We would have been proud of you. That one landed differently than I expected. Not because it hurt, because it made me feel something I hadn't anticipated. Tired. Just very, very tired. Would you have? I asked. Not aggressively. Genuinely. Because I told you about my first 10 clients, and you said that's nice. I told you I'd signed the lease on an office, and you asked if I thought it was wise. I told you we'd hit 100,000 in annual revenue, and you said hopefully it holds. You never once said proud. She started to cry. Real tears, not performative ones. My mom is not a dramatic crier. Seeing her cry made my dad put his hand over hers on the table, and that small gesture, that automatic reaching for her instead of me, told me everything I'd always already known. Vanessa said quietly, I didn't know either, for the record. I know, I said. I feel like an idiot, she said. You're not an idiot, I said. You just never asked. We sat there. The turkey was getting cold. The football game was still going in the other room, muffled through the wall. My mom wiped her eyes with her napkin. I want to hear about it, she said. Tell me everything. And there it was. The thing I'd waited to hear for years. Tell me everything, said with the right words in the wrong moment, after the wrong amount of time, as if a door could be pushed open from the outside, the same way it could be opened from the inside. I didn't tell her everything. I told her some things. I told her about the bakery client on Broad Street, the one who cried when her follower count took off. I told her about the day we signed our first corporate contract. I told her about the afternoon I looked at our books and realized we'd crossed $1 million, and I'd called my friend Fiona to celebrate because there was no one else to call. That last part landed visibly. I saw it on my mom's face, the understanding of what that sentence meant. That I'd had no one to call. The rest of Thanksgiving was strange and quiet in the way that comes after something has been said that can't be unsaid. My dad asked real questions, the good kind, about clients and team size and what kind of work we did. It was the longest sustained interest he'd shown in anything I'd done in 30 years, and I was honest enough with myself to feel the bittersweet of it. This was real, and it was also too late to be the thing I'd needed. Vanessa helped me carry dishes to the kitchen and said, without looking at me, I'm proud of you, Rachel. It didn't fix anything, but it wasn't nothing. I drove back to Richmond that night. The highway was mostly empty, the suburbs blurring by outside my window, and I thought about what my therapist had said about going as an observer. I'd gone in expecting to feel righteous or sad. I hadn't expected to feel as clear eyed as I did. The thing about building something quietly is that you stop needing the audience. You stop building for them. You build because the work itself starts to mean something that has nothing to do with who's watching. The approval I'd stopped getting at 14 had turned into something else over the years. I wasn't sure I had a word for it yet, but it felt like the opposite of needing. The next few months brought smaller waves than I expected. My mom texted me more. Real texts, asking about the business, about my team, about what I was working on. My dad called twice, which in the history of my adult life was unusual enough to notice. It didn't fix 30 years. I wasn't expecting it to, but I also didn't turn away from it. Vanessa and I had a real conversation over the phone in February, the longest we'd had in years. She was going through her own reckoning with the consulting firm, some restructuring that had left her role unclear, and she called me to ask for actual advice. Not the offering advice she hadn't asked for version from Thanksgiving. Real asking. I told her what I knew. We talked for an hour and a half. Steadlight kept growing. We expanded into DC and Charlotte. I gave a talk at a small business conference in Nashville and stood at the podium looking out at 200 people who were, for the most part, early in something the way I had been early in something, and I told them the true version of the story, not the clean one. The real one, with the cracked laptop hinge and the Broad Street bakery and the years of not knowing whether what I was building would ever be more than a hope. After the talk, a woman came up to me, maybe 40, with the look of someone who runs on 4 hours of sleep and pure determination. She said she'd been doing her own marketing work for local nonprofits and had been told her whole life by her family that she should get a real job. She'd been on the verge of giving up. I gave her my card. We still email sometimes. There's a version of this story where I walk out of Thanksgiving dinner and never look back, where I cut my family off entirely and frame my success as a clean escape from people you didn't deserve me. I've read those stories. I understand the appeal. But that's not what happened to me, and I think it matters to say so. What happened is messier and also more true. My family failed me in specific ways that had real consequences. The money they spent on my sister's education and not mine. The interest they showed in her career and not mine. The casual assumption that I would be fine while she needed investment. Those things happened. They shaped me. And they also eventually fueled something. But I'm not grateful for the neglect. I don't think being ignored made me stronger in some tidy, inspirational way. I think I became what I became despite it, not because of it. There's a difference, and that difference matters to me. My mom asked me once, a few months after Thanksgiving, whether I was angry at her. I thought about it for a long time before I answered. I said, I was. For a long time, I was very angry. I'm not as angry now. That's not the same as saying it was okay, and it's not the same as saying we're fine. It just means I decided to put the anger somewhere more useful than at you. She didn't say much after that, but she didn't argue either. I turned 29 in March and spent it with my team, who threw a surprise birthday thing in the conference room with a grocery store cake and too much icing and one of those foil balloon numbers. It was the kind of birthday I used to imagine as a kid, the kind where people actually show up. They sang off key and someone had accidentally gotten a 28 balloon instead of 29, and we all laughed about it. I looked around at these people, 9 of them, who showed up every day to build something they believed in. And I thought about the jar of tip money I'd kept in a drawer in my childhood bedroom, saving up for something I couldn't name yet. I think about that kid a lot. The one who did her homework alone at the kitchen table, who shot free throws in the empty driveway on Saturday mornings, who saved her tips and watched YouTube videos and kept building quietly in the dark. I want to say something to her, and I'll say it here because maybe someone else needs to hear it too. They were wrong about you. Not in the dramatic villain way, and not in a way they always knew and chose anyway. Just in the ordinary, quiet, damaging way that comes from deciding someone is fine without ever really checking. You were not fine. You were brilliant and struggling and completely invisible in a house full of people who should have seen you. And you built something anyway, not to prove it to them. You built it because the work meant something. Because the Broad Street bakery owner cried when people finally saw her. Because there is something in you that has always known that the whole point is to help people be seen. That didn't come from them, it came from you. Whatever you're building right now, in the quiet, without the audience you deserve, without the people in your corner who should be there, keep going. Not for the Thanksgiving moment, not for the look on someone's face when you say a number they weren't expecting. Keep going because the work is real and you are real, and both of those things were true long before anyone else figured it out. If you were sitting at that table and you looked across at the person who'd been the footnote their whole life and watched them say something that changed the air in the room, what would you want to say to them? I hope it's this: I see you. I always did. I've thought a lot about what actually happened at that Thanksgiving table. Not the surface version, the number I said out loud, the silence that followed, my mom's fork stopping midair. I mean, the thing underneath it, the reason it hit the way it did. Here's what I've come to understand: the way people treat you is not random. It's a pattern built from assumptions, and assumptions have consequences. My parents assumed Vanessa needed investment and I needed nothing. That wasn't a neutral choice. It was a bet, placed over and over every semester, every birthday, every conversation where they turned toward her and away from me. And like any bet, it had a return. The return just wasn't what they expected. Vanessa got everything poured into her, and it created a ceiling. Not because she isn't capable, but because being constantly rescued means you never fully learn how to rescue yourself. She hit that ceiling at the consulting firm and didn't know what to do with it. I got nothing poured into me, and it created something harder to name. Not strength exactly, more like necessity. I had to figure things out because there was no one offering to figure them out for me. That necessity became habit. That habit became Steadlight. I'm not saying neglect is a gift. It isn't. The years I spent feeling invisible in my own house cost me things I'll never fully calculate. There's a version of me who might have gotten further faster with a little belief behind her. I think about that version sometimes. I don't dwell there, but I visit. What I do believe is this: your choices accumulate. Every time I answered a customer email at midnight instead of giving up, that was a choice. Every time I took the feedback from a client who hated my first draft and fixed it instead of quitting, that was a choice. Every time I reinvested revenue back into the business instead of spending it on something comfortable, that was a choice. None of those choices felt heroic in the moment. They felt like the next thing I had to do, but they added up into something real. And that reality doesn't belong to anyone who wasn't in the room making them with me. The intelligence piece matters here, and I mean it in the full sense of the word. Not just being smart at things, but being honest about what you don't know and going to find out anyway. I didn't know anything about running a business when I started. I didn't know how to price a contract or negotiate a lease or manage people. I went and learned. That willingness to be a beginner over and over without embarrassment is its own kind of intelligence. It's the kind that doesn't show up on a report card and doesn't get celebrated at a dinner party. But it builds things. Rachel had to learn all of that alone, and she did. Not because she was extraordinary, because she decided that being overlooked was not the same as being stalked. There's a difference between those two things, and living inside that difference long enough to feel it is one of the most clarifying things that can happen to a person. If you are building something right now in the quiet, if you are the one in your family or your friend group or your workplace who gets the polite nod instead of the real interest, I want you to hear this. Keep the receipts, not for revenge, for yourself. Because the day will come, maybe at a dinner table, maybe somewhere else entirely, when the work will speak in a voice louder than any approval you were ever denied. And you will need to know in that moment that it was always yours.